Robert Baratheon's breath scraped through his chest like a rasp drawn over iron. The sweet, heavy perfume of milk of the poppy hung in the royal bedchamber, attempting to soften the stink of old blood and boar. Lamps guttered despite the hour. The windows stood open to the hot dusk, and the curtains stirred with the breath of King's Landing. Tar and sea rank and the faint sourness of too many people living too close. Eddard Stark wrote by that dying light. His hand was steady. The black hasps of wax were chilled, prepared. A plain clay bowl stood near, brimming with melted red, set upon a folded square of linen. He had a direwolf's head seal and the hand's hand, though not the crown. There sat a single parchment with Robert's crabbed, sprawling hand, an ink stain where his laugh had broken midway through a word and sent his quill skittering. The king had named him Lord Regent and Protector of the Realm until my heir comes of age. And Eddard had let the word be heir, not son. That choice was a weight upon the quill. It was the weight of Winterfell snow upon a pine bough, of a father's hand on his boy's shoulder. When he finished, he sprinkled sand, shook it away, and laid the parchment aside so that the seal could dry proper and true. Robert's seal, already affixed and cooling, the stag proud in wax. Robert's fingers moved. They clutched weakly at the coverlet, sliding with barely enough strength to gather the linen. "Did I tell you?" Robert breathed, the words thick with poppy and the stone weight of dying. "That the boar was uglier than Cersei?" Ned leaned forward despite himself and smiled. "An old, aching thing. You told me twice." Robert's chest hitched. A bubble of red kissed his beard and burst. "And you will do it right. You always did." He shut his eyes and muttered something that might have been a prayer, or a curse, or a woman's name. Ned rose from the chair. He could feel the kneeling benches of the gods wood beneath his knees though he was standing upon stone. He could feel ice water upon his face though King's Landing air pressed thick and hot. He set a finger to the cooling feed of wax upon the parchment, felt it harden beneath his touch, and lifted the letter by its edges. Varys slipped from a patch of shadow as if the shadow had decided to take form and speak. "My Lord Hand." Ned did not startle. His men once had said he did not startle even when a rime-cracked branch gave way underfoot and 100 pounds of snow thumped down beside him. And perhaps that had been true then. "Your little birds sing in the sick room now?" "I bid them not to chirrup," Varys replied mildly. "But they fly." He moved nearer the window, pale hands folded like a supplicant's. "Will that be enough to bear the weight upon it?" Eddard Stark looked down at the letter, and he saw all the lines that had led him here. Jon Arryn reading a line of copperplate script in an old book in the rookery. A stable boy's black hair. A gold-haired queen with a lioness gaze and her pretty children. A dark-haired boy in Robert's shadow who would never be a man at all. He saw Winterfell roofs smoking with kitchen fires, and Bran on a tower, and Catelyn's hand upon the banister, and he felt a shiver despite the heat. "It is what the king signed," he said. "Ah, Vari murmure. King's sign and the realm obeys. That is how it is written in the songs." "Varys," Ned said softly, "send for 6 men you trust to carry a thing through the streets." The eunuch's head tipped, curious as a crow. "You tempt me, Lord, to say that I do not trust men at all. Then send for boys. Septon boys if you prefer. Send for scriveners. Send for a man who can ring a bell and make it heard. There are more Septs in this city than there are Lannisters." The lilac lids fluttered once. Varys had no eyebrows, yet Ned thought he could see surprise bloom upon his face like a little morning flower. "You would proclaim?" The air through the window tasted of brine and smoke and the distant reek of tanneries. Beneath that, the city muttered to itself, the ceaseless rumor of 10 score streets. Ned thought of the Red Keep's iron, the walls and wards Cersei could command with a finger flick and a glance, and of the old man who sat at Baelor's feet with 7 oils at hand. "The king's words must be heard," he said. "He is dying. He may already be dead." Varys glanced toward Robert and composed his face into that mask he wore when he entered the small council chamber. "Your mercy is a brutal thing, my lord. There is an old saying in lists that there are 3 kinds of swords: steel, gold, and paper. You are drawing the third and discovering it cuts. It is the only blade I can draw in this place that will not kill half a city, Ned said, hearing Renly's heated whisper in his ear. Take the boy now, my lord, while he sits in his mother's lap, and remembering his own refusal, the line he had not crossed when knights began drawing steel in his mind. Make your birds fly, Lord Varys. Carry this to the Great September, and to the Sept of Cobbler's Square, and to the mother's tiny house on the Street of Silk, and to the half-collapsed Sept at the fish market. Every place where there is a bell to be rung and a voice to read. He laid the letter in Varys's hands. The eunuch weighed it delicately, as if it were a sop of sugared almond. The queen will not like having the realm read a letter she intends to tear. Then she can tear hers, Ned said. She cannot tear all the echoes. He felt old when Varys slipped away. He felt young when Robert's breath left him in a long sigh that was almost a laugh and did not return. By the time the first bells sang, full dark had not yet fallen. The city was a bowl. Sound pooled in it. Nerium blossoms fluttered in the gardens of the rich. Launderers' ropes creaked on the Street of Sisters. Fishwives in the market by the mud gate shouted that their eels were fresh even while they wrapped their fingers around each other's wrists and looked up. It was the bell of the great September 1st, the deep bronze that set teeth aching, and then a dozen little sisters piping, one after the other, hesitant and then sure. Septon Jorvan at Cobbler's Square had a crooked nose and a voice made rough from shouting the holy books at men who had better ears for a hammer's song. He held the paper with both hands and tried not to show how they trembled when he saw the sigil in red. He swallowed, lifted his chin, and spoke so all his small congregation might carry the words to the street. To my hand, the noble Eddard of House Stark. He began, because that was how one began when a king wrote to a man. His voice steadied as he read. All is lost. The realm must be guarded. I leave to you this charge, to rule in my stead, work my will, and protect my children until my heir comes of age. He faltered at children. The word a cliff he could not see to climb. My heir, he repeated more carefully. My heir, Robert Baratheon, king. The Sept was full as it rarely was in that hour. Stragglers came with sandal dust upon their toes and gossip ready in their mouths. And then they stood with mouths open instead. A girl with a basket of rushes clutched it so tight her knuckles went white. A gold cloak leaned the haft of his spear against his shoulder, and then let it slide to the floor with a clatter when he realized all heads had turned to him. Protector. The Septon went on in a smaller voice, now reading the words below, the charge that gave the letter its weight. Lord Regent and Protector of the realm Eddard Stark. So witnessed by a king's hand and seal. Protector, someone repeated on the steps. Protector, said the gold cloak, as if tasting a new title on his tongue. On the Street of Silk, in the mother house where the candles were always lit before the icon of the mother with her arms open to the broken and the bold, a kindly-eyed Septa read the same words to women who paused in their day's labor to listen with their heads bent. On the slope of Visigna's hill, an old man smoothed his beard and trembled but read through watery eyes. In the shadow-black September near the Street of Steel, where smiths came to wash soot from their hands before work, the bell-ringer cried and then bellowed the words to a crowd that smelled of leather and charcoal. In the great September of Baelor, the High Septon took the letter with hands that had learned the weight of oils and anointments and found a different gravity there. He made a sign over the parchment and read aloud beneath the 7-candled lamps to 100 silent witnesses. Outside, Varys's birds flew from step to step, pressing papers into hands like prayers. By the 4th bell, the city had begun to murmur. By the 6th, it had learned the phrase and was speaking it. Protector. Ned stood in the small, narrow room between chambers where the hand washed his hands and rinsed his mouth. He watched the blood-stained water turn pale and then clear as it spiraled out. He did not look at the basin when he dried his face. He did not look at himself in the horn-polished plate that served as a mirror when he passed it. He went back to Robert. The bed was still. The hush in the room had changed timbre. Silence acquires shape after death. It takes on a curve, a ridge, a slick. Ned had known that since he stood beneath Winterfell's crypts with his father some winter night in his boyhood. learning the names of the kings in the north. He crossed the distance and laid his hand upon Robert's brow. Still warm, still heavy with poppy, but there was no more king in him. He was not alone long. Pycelle came wheezing, blinking his soft old eyes, then fluttering flustered hands. A pair of silent sisters ghosted past, faces hidden, their hands deft and quick. Renly Baratheon arrived last, wind-touched, green cloak thrown back, his eyes bright as if he had been running. He stopped when he saw the sisters and his brother lying still as a dream that had gone cold. Renly's lips parted and closed. He nodded once when his eyes found Ned's. Then the letter. It was red, Ned said. Renly's laugh was a half thing. I heard the bells. I thought a Septon had lost his thumb. His face sobered as a candle flame. Cersei will move. She will move like a cat when the mouse stops running. We should move faster. We will convene the small council, Ned said. He heard in his own voice the iron he kept for moments when ice must be swung and not wept over. We will read the king's words a last time before them. The law will hold. The law, Renly said, and there was something in his tone, respect or the ghost of an old quarrel, it was hard to tell. I would rather hold a sword, but if the law is the sword you will draw it hard. He paused. I will see my brother properly wrapped. Will you make ready for the council? I will, Ned said. He did not say there was no need for haste with the wrapping. The sisters' hands were nimble, and they had done this since Aegon set stone upon Visenya's hill. He sent Tomard and Desmond and Varley with messages, with words that could not be intercepted by a king's justice who was no longer king. He sent a boy to Syrio Farrell to fetch Arya home, even if she spat like a cat in a rain barrel. He found Sansa with Septa Mordain. She had folded her hands so neatly it hurt him to see. Her face was smooth and serious. The bells, she said, very grave. Are they for King Robert? They are, he said. She nodded as if she had guessed a lesson's answer and was relieved that she had chosen rightly. Then Joffrey is king, she said, so calm it cut. Ned looked into his daughter's face as if he could see the shape of the words she had learned to hold. That will be decided, he said, between law and gods and lords, not by bells. Joffrey said he would be, Sansa whispered, and then, more quickly, Lady Stark, mother. Your mother is not here, Ned said, and could not keep the roughness from his voice. He gentled it at once. And the bells do not make a king. You will stay with Septa Mordain until I send for you. You will remain indoors. No, Sansa, this is not a punishment. It is a winter's afternoon's caution. A hearth inside a storm. Her mouth trembled and firmed. He kissed her brow without saying more. He asked for Arya again and was told she had not come. She was a fish or a bird. She would come only when she realized she had lost her shadow. The small council chamber felt smaller than it had the day before, and smaller still when Cersei Lannister walked in at the head of her pack. The lioness did not purr. She did not even bare her teeth. She moved quiet, slenderly, her hair coiled like gold rope, her sons and daughter behind her, the hound at Joffrey's shoulder, Meryn Trant in white behind them, Boros blunt at his friend's flank. Her maids were swan necks and smooth faces. Her guards were slabs of iron. Pycelle coughed. Littlefinger smiled as if someone had told a mirthful tale at dinner. Varys folded his hands exactly as he had folded the king's letter, palms touching. Ned stood with the letter laid upon the table. He kept his palm near it but did not touch it. He could feel the minute irregularities in the grain of the wood through his skin, as if he were reading a message carved there once by some bored steward. The king is dead, he said, and he made himself speak the words without ornament. He died with his seal upon this letter, and with his hand upon mine. He named me Lord Regent and Protector of the Realm. No, Cersei said, as if the word were a glass she could tap to hear if it rang true. Joffrey. The letter, Ned said, as a man might say, the gallows when the condemned began to make poetry. Littlefinger's eyes slid over the wax. He leaned back, hands spread, empty and expressive. We have heard bells, he said lightly, and, unless my little birds have been singing out of turn, Some letters have been heard as well. Very clever birds. Very industrious hands. Cersei's gaze flicked toward Varys and then past him to Pycelle. Is this legal? She asked the old man, as if she could lift the word and wear it. The king's hand and seal, Pycelle wheezed. MMH. Yes, the law, the precedent is... He coughed so hard his neck trembled. Lord Eddard is the protector, by the letter. The letter, Cersei said, and with 2 fingers she slid the parchment nearer and lifted it in a gesture that would have been delicate if there had not been a war behind it. She read. He watched her face. There was no flinch, no twitch. She had iron in her. She put it down. The letter, and bells. She smiled then, a knife blade glimpse. It does not name Stannis, does it? It names me, Ned said. It names you to guard my son, Cersei said, and her smile went gentler. Chilled milk poured over honey. Until he comes of age. Until the rightful heir comes of age, Ned said. Stannis, Renly murmured from behind him, just loud enough for the table to hear. He had come with a green flash at his shoulder in the shape of Ser Loras, though Loras Tyler had wisely remained outside. Or do we scrape the hair off the heads of every bastard in this city to make a new court fashion? Pycelle blanched and reached for his chain as if he might eat a link for strength. Lord Renly, your brother? My brother is dead, Renly said. The law says. The law, Cersei said, just a little more loudly than he, and for the first time she let some steel ring through the word. The law says the son follows the father. The king is dead. Long live the king. Joff! A bell pealed. It was as if the great September itself had grown a throat and spoke through the wall. It rolled through the stone of the table and rattled the rings on Pycelle's fingers and made the wine in Littlefinger's cup tremble. The second bell answered, a smaller voice piping that men were listening to the first. And then a third and a fourth, like the city deciding to harmonize with itself. Cersei's mouth went hard. Her eyes, though, gleamed. For a heartbeat, Ned thought she loved this. He saw then, with sudden clarity, that she did, as a player who wishes always to be dealt strange hands because they are hands others cannot play. You have made the small folk into a chorus, Lord Stark, she said. Did you think their song would be yours? It is the king's, Ned said. The king we will have, she replied, is the one who sits the throne. This letter read by old men who smell of incense. She flicked 2 fingers as if shooing a fly. You think Janos Slynt will put his men between that boy and his throne? Varys's lashes fluttered. Littlefinger's mouth curved. Renly's knuckles tightened around the back of a chair, and Ned's palm cooled where it hovered by the parchment. I think, Ned said, that any man will find it easier to hold his ground when he hears he is standing upon the law. I think any man will find it easier to stand, Cersei said, when he is standing upon a mountain of my father's gold. She had not drawn steel and neither had he. They did not draw. They exchanged coin and paper and looked to see which cut deeper. Janos Slynt, Ned said to Varys without looking away from the queen, will present himself to me within the hour. Send for him. I will fly, Varys said, and was gone. Littlefinger lounged. And will you send for Mace Tyrell as well? Oh, he's not in the city, is he? Pity. So many flowers, so little patience. Does this letter of yours add thorns to roses? You will attend me, Lord Baelish, Ned said. I'm attending, Littlefinger said cheerfully, and lifted his cup to drain it. Oh, I am attending. They might have sat that way till dark. Instead, the council disassembled like a little toy, half of it drawing to Cersei, half scraping their chairs back and following Ned without a word, which left only Pycelle blinking and Renly biting his lip to high. To that he was smiling. For men smile in war when their blood runs a little hotter and they cannot help but delight in the shape of the day. Janos Slynt presented himself with caution at twilight. He had a butcher's face, broad and fleshy and easily reddened. He had a butcher's hands, thick-fingered and roughened where a blade's haft might ride. He bowed, and his eyes darted like flies. Lord Hand, he said, and only then, Lord Regent, it seems. It does, Ned said. The Queen's men, Slint began, and then stopped with the clumsy honesty of a man who does not like to say he has been bought when the buyer may be listening for his value. "The gold cloaks will keep the peace," he said instead. "I am a man for peace." "The law is peace," Ned said. "The king appointed me protector. The bells have made that known. Your duty is to the realm. I ask only that you uphold what has been read aloud in a dozen septs and heard in 100 streets." Slint did not look at Littlefinger, who had made himself available to be looked at. He looked at the paper lying on Ned's desk, which was not the same paper he had seen in a sept but wore the same wax. "I," he said, as if testing the word on his own tongue. "I, my lord." Ned did not believe him. He was not sure he needed to. When he dismissed Yano Slint, he sent with him a half-dozen men of the north with quiet eyes and heavy hands. Men who would go to 6 barracks and sleep upon the floors and eat the stew and listen to what men say when they do not think words will be carried. He sent men, too, to stand beside the doors of the throne room and to walk the galleries of the Great September. He did not send them to be gallant. He sent them to be seen. He sent 2 ravens himself, and did not leave their message to Pycelle's sleepy scribes or Varus's doves. He wrote in a small hand, plain, unadorned, "To Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, your brother's will was read at Vespers. He named me protector. I have read the book John Arryn died reading. Come." He hesitated, and then wrote a second to his wife. "Caitlin, the bells told the city that Robert has left us. I am protector until the rightful heir is named. Watch over our son. If Tywin moves, Robb will want to move faster. Tell him to keep his head." He could not tell a boy he had named for his father to keep his head, as if it were a thing one might misplace on a shelf. He could not tell Caitlin not to fear. He said what he could, folded the letters, sealed them, and sent ravens into the black. Night fell upon a city that did not know whether it slept in a wolf's den or a lion's cage. Sansa dreamed of Joffrey's hair shining like the sun a king ought to have, and of a wolf standing between her and the sun so that she might look at it without her eyes burning. Arya did not dream at all. She slept as a cat does, a quick-breathed doze with one ear turned toward any footfall. Ned did not sleep while the moon moved from one side of the Tower of the Hand to the other. He stood at the window, studied the red keep that had been Aegon's and Maegor's and Jaehaerys's, and imagined a different sort of fortress, snow-dark against a winter sky, a heart tree's face watching. At dawn, the small folk woke to rumors thick as fog. The king was dead. The queen had smiled as if she had swallowed something sweet. The tall man from the north had iron in his voice. The bells had called him protector. A drunk had shouted Stannis at a passing boy with a stag pinned to his cloak and had been kicked for it. At the fishmonger's square, a woman kissed her fingers and touched them to a wooden icon of the mother and asked her to look with kind eyes upon a city that might soon fill with orphans. Cersei moved like a knife under silk, as Ned had known she would. Her handmaids became messengers. Her red cloaks brought quiet from one alley and noise to another. The red keep shut itself like a fist. Ser Boros and Ser Meryn stood with straight backs at the doors, and behind them stood Tanda Stokeworth and others whose names were small but whose purses were not. Joffrey dined with silver. The hound stood behind him like a shadow shaped like a man. They sent for the High Septon, and he sent back that the gods kept him at prayer. Barristan Selmy came late to that breakfast, though he had been bid early. He had spent the night walking in his white, his hair as bright as his cloak, from the Great September to the doors of the Red Keep and back again. He had watched men gather in clumps to whisper. He had watched Northmen nod to him with blunt respect and Lannister men with wary calculation. In his long life, he had served more kings than he had fingers upon one hand. He had killed for them and stood between them and death. He had no children of his body, but he had sons and daughters of his oath. He knew the law well enough to recite it in his sleep. Inside the Red Keep, a boy with hair like summer wheat looked up at him with ill-concealed impatience, as boys do when they wish a song would end so their own hunting might begin. "Ser Barristan," Joffrey said, and did not say please or good morning. "The crown needs you." The hand oversteps himself. He presumes to make himself king in all but name. Barristan looked down into the boy's face. He thought of Ares and the day the prince had burst into the throne room stinking of smoke and screamed at his father. He thought of Rhaegar riding away. He thought of a boy with black hair and a laugh that turned battle into feast. "The king left a will," Barristan said. "It names Lord Stark Protector. It names him to guard me," Joffrey said, and his mouth pursed. And in that instant he was not a king at all. He was a child who had never been told no without it being followed by but. "Until your heir comes of age," Barristan said, "which is not in dispute only because the question of the heir is itself the dispute." Cersei's smile was a thing of the lips, not the eyes. "Ser Barristan," she said softly, "would you see the city torn over argument like this? Words read in a sept. These things are for maesters and men in heavy cloaks. Let Lord Stark argue with himself. You will stand with your king." Barristan had never been much for arguments. Swords argued and made their point beyond cavil. He did not draw his sword now. He inclined his head, and this too had the weight of a sword drawn. "I will stand with the law, your grace. Commands less blood than steel. For today, that means I will go to the Great September and stand beside the High Septon to make sure the realm hears what it must hear without fear." Cersei's hand tightened upon Joffrey's shoulder. The boy's eyes sparked with a child's rage banked by a mother's grip. "You would leave me," Joffrey said. "I would guard you by guarding the realm," Barristan said. "I will answer your summons when the council sits." He went. The hound watched him go, his scar a second mouth. When he had gone, Cersei bent her head to Joffrey's ear. The boy nodded and smiled, and the smile was a thing with teeth. She sent a messenger like a whisper beneath a door. Littlefinger weighed coin and wrote notes and tapped a quill against his teeth and smiled at the notion that a letter might be a sword. He knew it could be a purse. Janos Slint counted men and counted again and wished numbers were beef carcasses he could stack and restack until they weighed out right. Ned sat with the High Septon at a table beneath 7 lamps. The glass colored so that the light fell upon their hands like the hands of the gods. The old man's fingers trembled not at all as he broke his bread. "In my youth," the High Septon said, "I was a mason's son. We built a small sept in a village so poor it did not have a name for itself beyond ours. When we set the cornerstone, the old Septon cried. I asked him why. He said that he had seen men lay stones all his life and yet did not understand them. We build, he said, and think we have made a thing of stone, but it is a thing of men. There is no wall so strong as the men who believe in it. There is no tower so weak as the one no one wishes to stand. You have made a wall with paper." Ned found that he could smile at that. "And will men stand upon it?" "They already are," the old man said. "I've heard 1,000 men murmur the word protector since last night. Their voices are rough and their hands are dirty, and when they say it, they make it sound like bread." He looked at Ned with eyes that had grown soft not from weakness but from looking too often upon things that might make a man hard. "You must not let them starve." "I will not," Ned said. He thought of the city's granaries and of Littlefinger's slick fingers counting coins and of the Red Keep's gates closed like a fist. He thought of ships. He thought of Stannis. He thought of the Riverlands and the Riverlords, and of a boy with a wolf who would soon be a man riding south with men who had chewed leather in winter and counted themselves fed. They brought the letter into the nave and read it again at noon. The sound of it in that high space was different than the sound in a quarters sept with roof beams replaced with patched planks and a floor strewn with rushes that smelled of river and rot. The great marble bore the weight of 1,000 footsteps. The air smelled of lantern oil and something green. Men and women stood shoulder to shoulder. There were faces Ned did not know but recognized as a kind of face. Dockman, fishwife, baker, smith. A woman with a babe asleep in a sling, its mouth rooting dreamily. There were faces he knew and did not recognize because they belonged to enemies who had stepped into a house where enemies must be courteous. Cersei, pale and bright. Pycelle at her shoulder like a falcon with gout. Littlefinger smooth as oiled leather. Renly with a Tyrell flower near his neck like mockery of mourning. Barristan, for the moment white and still, a pillar that would not shift. The High Septon raised his hands and the crowd's murmuring ebbed. He did not speak of kings or queens or sons. He spoke the letter because that was the work that had come to him. When he finished, he said simply, "The realm has been charged. The charge will be kept. The mother weeps, the father weighs, the smith works." Cersei's mouth moved. She glanced up to where sunlight made a pillar of itself in the dust. She bared her teeth at the god who had thrown it. Then she stepped forward within the space the seven made and made a little curtsy and smiled as if she were making wedding vows. "The realm will have a king before sundown," she said. Her voice was sweet and just loud enough to carry to the doors. "We will mourn Robert with all the grief he deserves, and then the boy he left will be raised up. Janos Slynt will keep order. Men who wish to pray may pray. Men who wish to steal may discover what happens to hands that offend. Lord Stark, do not forget that the realm needs a steady hand more than a stern one." Ned did not answer her in the Sept, because the Sept was for the gods' words and not men's. When they left the nave, he, the High Septon, Renly, Barristan, and a knot of men from the north who looked wrong among the gleaming marble as wolves look wrong in a perfumed garden, he said softly, "It is a strange thing to hear a woman who tore her husband's peace with her own hands speak of steady hands." Renly laughed under his breath. Barristan did not. His face had a weathered dignity, but Ned thought he saw something there. Agreement, perhaps, or the sorrow of a man who had seen too many kings turn to ashes in their own mouths. "Janos Slynt has been seen with purses so heavy he walks as if stepping through deep mud," Renly said. "Your paper sword may not cut through gold." "Then I will make it a spear," Ned said almost grimly. "Spears pin men to the earth when they try to run. We will call the council." They called the council. They called Janos Slynt. He came sweating and eager and bowed to both sides of the room as if he wished to please the air between them. "My lords," he said, "my queen, I have men at the doors of the throne room, and men at the gates, and men at... You will have men at my side when I sit upon the throne," Joffrey said, cutting him off, his chin cocked, his voice cracking in the echoing hall. The throne itself hunched behind him, leagues of shadow and iron, a thing that had grown like a tree from a different forest and put down roots in a place where such trees did not belong. "You will not sit the throne until the lords of the realm confirm your right," Ned said, and the words rang in the air and made faces turn. "Who will do the confirming?" Littlefinger murmured. "The lords of the realm in this room? We are rather fewer than we ought to be for such a lordly undertaking." "The law is sufficient," Ned said. "Pycelle, recite the forms." Pycelle began mumbling through centuries while Cersei watched Ned with an expression that would have been curiosity if it had not been hunger. When the old man came to the portion where a protector was appointed when the succession was uncertain, he clung to it as drowning men cling to a spar, and he did not allow his tongue to stumble. When he fell wheezing silent, the echo took up and wheezed in his place. "The hand is protector," Renly said into that wheeze, "which is to say, Lord Stark is." He did not draw his sword and the hound did not draw his. Men drew breath instead. The gold cloaks at the hall's doors shifted their weight and glanced at one another, one nudging another with an elbow, one scratching his beard as if it itched and he had nothing else to do with his hand. They were not bored. They were afraid. Fear makes hands itch. Cersei smiled. "The hand will protect the boy by making certain men keep their voices soft. That is all," she said. "Janos," Slynt jerked as if someone had tugged his string. "My queen, your men will escort my son to the throne," Cersei said. Janos did not look at Ned now. He looked down at his hands. He licked his lips. Littlefinger's mouth curled like a cat's tail. The hound rolled his shoulder once as if to ease a kink. Ned waited. He could feel the line poised between the men at the door and the woman with a smile and the boy who wished to be a king. He had seen hunting dogs wait thus for a command they did not understand. The feet that moved first were not Janos's or the hound's. They belonged to Barristan Selmy. He walked between Cersei and Ned and stopped at the foot of the throne and turned. "The king will not sit today," he said calmly. "The king sits when the realm calls him to sit, and the realm has not chosen. If a man could be struck with a silence, a room could be too." It was as if someone had tossed a cloth over a birdcage. The hound shifted his weight. Marentrant's mouth went slack. Boros Blunt turned red. Renly's mouth shaped the beginning of a half-sound and paused there. Cersei's eyes narrowed. "You are sworn to guard the king." "I am sworn to guard the law that makes him king," Barristan said. "Men think there is no way for one man's words to hurt another man. There is." Cersei did not flinch, but Joffrey's mouth sat open a heartbeat too long before he snapped it shut. "Take him," Joffrey said to Meryn, and then louder, because he had found his voice and it needed to be heard. "Take him!" Marentrant had never struck a man like Barristan Selmy in his life, if he had ever imagined it. He had done so from a warm bed, and it had made him smile. He took a step. Barristan drew his blade not because the boy had told a man to take him, but because the law had been given a face and that face had been told to kneel. Ned did not want blood in the throne room. He wanted paper and bells and men making the sound of assent with their throats instead of iron. He moved before he thought he had moved. The men from Winterfell moved with him, not to draw steel, but to put themselves into spaces where men would have to see them before they walked into them, to lay a hand on Janos Slint's elbow, to steer men by gentle firmness as one steers a horse that wants to shy. "Enough," he said, and his voice was iron after all. "We will not make a king in a brawl." He turned his head slightly, enough to catch Janos Slint's eye. "You will keep order, Lord Commander. If a man draws a sword, you will take him. If a woman calls for blood, you will tell her that blood makes a poor ointment for laws. If a boy calls himself king, you will tell him to wait on the gods." Janos Slint licked his lips again. He did not like to be told what to do by any man not bearing a purse. He did not like to choose between two purses either. He was, however, a butcher. When two beasts charge one another in the yard, the butcher steps back and makes sure he has not brought his fine boots. "I will keep order," Janos Slint said. "Order." Cersei gave him a glance that told him he would count his fingers later and find he had fewer than he thought. She took her son's arm and turned him away with a grace that made the turning a proclamation anyway. "Come, my sweet," she said. "Let us visit the September. The Father weighs all, and perhaps he will find a way to weigh this nonsense too." They went. The council dispersed to their corners. Barristan put his sword back into its sheath with a motion as smooth as a man putting his pen into its case when the day's work has ended. Renly blew out a breath that fluttered his hair. Littlefinger laughed very softly, and because he was a man who never wasted a moment, he drifted near Ned as if pulled by curiosity and not calculation. "You're making a new song," he said in a voice almost admiring. "I wonder if it will scan." Ned said nothing to him, because he could not find words that would not begin with, "The last time I trusted you, men died." Littlefinger took silence as a toy and made it dance. In the street of Flower near the river, a woman wit. Flower to her elbows told another that the tall lord with the long face had looked like a statue and the queen like a fox, and the man with white hair had said no to both of them without raising his voice. In the street of Steel, men hammered iron and made sparks fly as if stars had fallen there, and one of them said softly that he had always liked the north because iron felt truer in cold hands. In the alleys where the sun came only as a sliver of gold for an hour, men took their knives out and then put them back in their belts and drank beer and waited to see whose blood they might be paid to spill. Sirio Farrell had a feather in his hair that had once been blue. It had faded to the color of a king's old robe. He held a wooden sword and a girl faced him, stubborn mouth set, hair in her eyes. He had been fetched late, and the handsman had stood in the doorway and said, "Sirio, he asks you to bring her safe." And Sirio had said, "I can bring her safe if she is willing to be brought." And the girl had said, "I am not." "Today," Sirio said, "there is a dance called The Tall Man Does Not Bow. We will learn it." Arya scowled. "Does it need a curtsy?" "It needs a step," he said, and he moved like water around a rock and tapped her shoulder with his wooden sword. "You keep your feet beneath you, little cat. If you keep your feet, you keep your head." "I was keeping my feet," she said, and he tapped her again. And by noon she was panting and flushed and happier than she had been since she crossed the neck. Sirio would bring her, if he could. He would twist through corridors men did not think a man of his age could slip through, and he would laugh softly when men who thought a sword was a thing that lived outside a man's arm discovered that it lived within a man's balance. But the Red Keep had been built to confuse, and there were men inside it now who liked confusion. Varys's birds brought Ned a reply before sundown, though it had been written the night before the ravens had gone out, before the bells. The parchment smelled of salt and smoke and restraint. Stannis Baratheon did not write "My Lord," unless he meant "My Lord." He wrote "I am coming." It was not many words, but it was as if someone had told Ned that the wall he had built had found its first stone. He sent for Renly. "Stannis," Renly said when he read, and laughed. But it was not the same laugh that had almost begun in the throne room. "He will come with ships and an iron will and a face like a door. He will come and say that all must be as the law says. You will press paper into his hand and he will make it iron with his mouth. The Tyrells will not love this." "The Tyrells," Ned said slowly, because he did not pretend to know the hearts of roses. He knew only thorns' pricks. "I do not need the Tyrells." "You will regret not needing them," Renly said dryly. "But it is not my business now. It is Loras's, and Mace's, and, God's help us, it is Alistair's and Garland's and Olenna's. Stannis will make them choose between paper and petals. He will not like how many choose petals, but he will not care that he does not. That is Stannis." Renly did not say, "You should have taken the boy." It hung between them like steam from a bath. "When Stannis comes," he said instead. "I will go." "You will go?" Ned asked. "To High Garden," Renly said easily, "where the roses grow. They will choose their king out of the soil, and I will be there to tell them which seed is sweetest." "And which seed is that?" Ned asked quietly. Renly's mouth curved. "Mine," he said, without shame, without apology, as if he were talking about a horse he meant to stake at the track. "You will not like it, and Stannis will not like it, and the realm will like it very much. But we need not quarrel yet. The day has enough quarrels in it. My brother had a way of making men love him. I have a way of making men want to be near me. Stannis has a way of making men obey. Let us each do what we do best." "What do I do best?" Ned asked, almost bemused. "You make men believe you," Renly said. "Do not prove me wrong." The city waited. It did not wait in stillness. It shifted and murmured and did the things a city must do if it is not to die. Baking, tending, stealing, loving, spilling, sowing, lying. But it waited. It waited to see whether a boy would be made king with his mother's smile and a butcher's gold. It waited to see whether the old men's bells could drown out the clink of coin. It waited to see if ships would come sailing up the Blackwater with a man upon them who would make the word law a wall all the way to the sky. Cersei moved. She moved by taking Sansa's hand and making sure everyone saw. "Is this what you wish for your father, sweetling?" she cooed, and Sansa nodded because she wished for 1,000 things and none of them knew what shape to take inside her. "Your father is making him an enemy of the crown," Cersei told the girl later, not gently, and Sansa felt that the word enemy had been laid like an arrow's shaft across her father's shoulders while her mother was far away and the godswood was gone and the world had only red stone and heat in it. Sansa wrote a letter with words that were soft and urgent both, and Littlefinger delivered it with a smile that hid teeth. Varys moved. He moved by being where men had not yet thought to ask for him. He moved by listening. He learned before midnight that Janos Slynt had met with 6 captains and that 3 had left with purses and 3 with frowns. He learned that a group of men with their hair like spun gold had been seen near Rosby Road with their swords hanging down the way swords hang when men do not want to show they know how to use them. He learned that a boy with black hair and blue eyes had gone to sleep in a smithy with a helm beside his head and that his mother had wept. Littlefinger moved. He moved men like counters upon a board. He breathed into Janos Slynt's ear and the butcher bob, bed and took a purse and another in the name of keeping order. He sent a man with quick hands to the kitchens and told him to make sure the hand stew was salted as a sea. Not poisoned. Not yet. Salt is how a man tastes the sea in his food without going near it. It makes him thirsty. Littlefinger meant to make men thirsty. Syrio Farrell moved like wind around pillars and through halls, Arya in his shadow, and when Meryn Trant came, clanking, huffing, contempt hidden in smirks. Sirio smiled as if he were pleased to see him. "Only one?" he asked. "Are you sure? I am from Bravos. I have only my wooden sword. Perhaps you will come back when you have more men." Marin's mouth made the shape of a smile and failed to fill it. His sword hissed free. Men in red cloaks glanced at one another and wished to be elsewhere. Arya kept her feet, because Sirio's voice in her ear was a tether and a promise. "Left," he said, and she went left, and his wooden sword cracked against Marin's iron. And it would be a pretty thing to say that the wood splintered the iron. It did not, but it set Marin's wrists to tingling and made him curse. And when a man curses for small pains, he grows impatient for big ones. Sirio laughed. He was laughing when a second man came where there had been none a moment before. A man with a round red face and small clever eyes and a mouth that made everything sound like a jest. "Ah, Sirio," Littlefinger said, as if greeting an old friend met by chance in a market. "We mustn't bruise the hand's pets. Not before he comes to whistle for them." "I am no man's pet," Arya said, fierce and ridiculous. And Sirio said, "Hush, little cat. Do not say so loudly what you are until you have learned to be it." Littlefinger's eyes took her measure as a trader takes a bolt of cloth between finger and thumb and weighs what it might fetch in another market. He nodded once to Marin. "Do try not to kill him," he murmured, and slipped away like a coin from a man's fingers. Sirio's wooden sword broke, as wood breaks under iron. He danced anyway. He made men stumble over their own heels. He made Arya slip through a place where a tapestry hung and be gone. He did not follow her. He would not have made it if he tried. He understood the mathematics of rooms. He smiled, and he drew breath, and he did the thing men sometimes do that is not wise but is right. When Arya found her father after, her hair was full of threads. Her small face was white. Her hands trembled and then went still. "He stayed," she said, and Ned knew whom she meant. And a piece of him that had weighed patience and prudence all day turned and looked at the part that remembered a boy on a green summer hillside shouting and running with his brothers, swords made of willow and promises. He crouched and put his hands on Arya's shoulders. "He did what he had to," he said. "So do we now." "What do we do?" Arya asked, and the question put steel into him the way a whetstone puts a blade's edge back on. "We leave the Red Keep," he said simply. "We go to the Great September. That is where the law lives today. We make the old man's house a fortress of words, and then we make the words call men to stand." They went like ghosts through corridors that had been made to confuse ghosts. Varys met them in one place where two halls kissed and whispered, and his eyes were almost sadly admiring. "You move like a man who has walked in fog all his life and knows how to find his way by scent," he said. "The Queen has shut the gates of the Red Keep. The city's gates are more negotiable." "I am not leaving the city," Ned said. "Not yet. I will not make it a Lannister's pleasure to say I fled." "As you wish," Varys murmured. "The Great September is where you say the words live. The Queen would like to say they have died there. She has sent for Yanoslint again. She has sent for more gold cloaks than coin can purchase." "Can coin not purchase them?" Ned asked. "Not all of them," Varys said. "Not if they think the city will hate them for the purchase." They made it to Baelor's great doors before men in red cloaks with Lannister lions set their feet there too. There was a moment when two rivers met, eddies colliding, froth white with uncertainty. Then the High Septon himself appeared, and he was not so timid as rumor had made him. He had been a mason's son. He understood weight. "This is the House of the Seven," he said, not loud, but in a voice that was shaped to carry on stone. "You will not bring blood into it. This man is the protector by a king's word. He will find sanctuary here. Bring your business to the nave if you must bring it at all. There is room enough for men to use words rather than swords." Lannister men knew that cutting a Septon down on Baelor's steps would not simply make blood. It would make riot. They stepped back. They were not cowards. They were sensible. Sensible men can be bought because they wish to survive to spend, but they avoid dying in public. Arya grinned at them, fox quick, and would have spat if Ned had not set a hand upon her head. Inside, they made the Great September a camp. They did not pitch tents, but they set resolve. Barristan came, and half a dozen white cloaks who had begun to look at their hands as if they had forgotten what they were good for. Some gold cloaks came as well, shy and then brave, drawn by the sense that they were men at a hinge day rather than on a market day. Common men came, bakers and smiths with flour and soot still upon them, washerwomen with red hands, a ragged boy with bright eyes who edged close to Arya and then skipped away when she stared, a few lords with plainer cloaks than they normally wore, because lords sometimes like to feel like common men if they do not think the feeling will last long. Cersei came too, under the Seven's light. She had not the faintest intention of using words rather than swords, but she was willing to let men speak so that they could see how useless words were. She brought Joffrey. Men in such places pretend they do not see boys begin to be men. They saw this one. He had learned to hold his chin as if he were wearing a weight upon it. He had learned to look down his nose. He had not learned not to smirk. "It is very pretty," he said without bothering to lower his voice, as if men could not hear him unless he wished them to. "All the lamps, all the poor people pretending to matter." "Your Grace," Barristan said, the title flat as a table. Cersei made a small gesture and the boy was silent. "Lord Stark," she said, "if you wish to be popular, you should have gone to a tourney to hand out wreaths. This is not a tourney." "No," Ned said. "It is a wake. We will not crown before we bury." Joffrey made a noise in his throat. "I am the king," he said. "I command you." "You do not command me," Ned said. He did not look at the boy. He looked at Cersei. "You have known the law your whole life. You have lived in courts and you have made them love you. Do not pretend to be a miller's wife who thinks a parchment is a kindling scrap. You have made the small folk love you," Cersei said, eyes cold hot. "Do not pretend that they will thank you when their bellies grow light and their hearts heavy because you did not let the king sit and comfort them with coin." "I will feed them," Ned said. "I will open Hern's granaries. I will requisition bread from the bakers and pay them from the royal accounts." Cersei's smile brightened at that, as if he had made a mistake in a game, and she was gracious enough to tell him, "Ah, the royal accounts. You have found the chest in which Robert kept his dragons? How unsporting of you to find buried treasure." "Littlefinger," Ned said without looking at the man who stood 3 paces behind the queen where her shadow would fall upon his boots. "You will open the granaries." "I would," Littlefinger said merrily, "except I have mislaid the key. I say that not because I love the poor but because the poor love bread, and bread is a thing I might prefer to feed them than iron. The granaries are yours in law and in theory, my lord. In practice, the men who hold the keys have had Lannister purses put into their wives' hands. They will be surprised to learn the locks open with paper." "We will change the locks," Ned said. "We will do it before nightfall." "That is work for a man with a hammer," Littlefinger said, "and not a man with letters. But yes, we will change the locks. We will even find men with hammers. It warms my heart to be useful." The day stretched and the light moved along the Sept's floor. In the late afternoon, a sound came to them from the river, a rhythm men know better than their wives' breaths' oars. Bells rang again, not the Sept's this time but the harbor's, and men whispered a name the way they whisper the name of winter when the first leaf turns, inevitable and unwelcome and bracing. When Stannis came ashore, he looked as if the wind had been arguing with him the whole way and had lost. He had a face like graven wood and eyes that weighed men. Davos Seaworth walked a pace behind him, a man with a smuggler's shoulders and a knight's hands, lacking fingers and lacking fear of lacking them. Stannis had not come to the Red Keep. He went straight to the Great September. Men might have wondered why until they remembered that men in the Red Keep did not like losing arguments. The gods did not always mind when men lost arguments. Sometimes they seemed to enjoy it. He stood just inside the nave and looked upon the lamps and upon the men who had gathered beneath them. He saw Cersei. He saw Joffrey. He saw Barristan and Renly and Littlefinger, and he saw Ned. He made the barest incline of his head to the last. "Lord Stark," he said, "you have made a mess." "I have made the will known," Ned said. "The rest is men not liking to hear it." Stannis's mouth flattened. Men do not like to be told that the law is harder than their heads. Where is the book? Pycelle had carried the lineages and histories down from the rookery himself for fear a boy might slip and break his hip. He had set it upon a lectern as if it were a relic. He brought it now, breathing with effort, and set it where Stannis's hands could touch it. Stannis touched it as men touch a sword, aware. He paged to the place he had paged before with Jon Arryn. His hands knew the path like a blind man's to a chair. He read. He read names that had no music because they had not been given music. They had been given truth. He read hair colors. He read a line of words that had killed a man in a rookery. He looked up. "The children," he said, and did not soften the word with any name. "Bring them." Cersei's face did not move, but her hand slid toward Joffrey's arm. "You will not touch him." "Nor would I," Stannis said, contempt like salt. "Hair. Eyes. We are not beasts. We are men. We make judgments with our heads." He looked to Barristan. "You have eyes." Barristan stepped forward. He looked at the boy. He looked as if he were seeing a sword from a strange angle, one he had been too long to look from before. "He has his mother's hair," he said very quietly, "as do his brother and sister. The king had black hair. His brother had black hair. His bast, his sons born on the wrong side of the blanket had black hair. Boys I have watched run and fall and skin their knees. Black hair." The great September held its breath. Cersei, for the first time, did not smile. Joffrey did. It made his face wrong. "My father," he began. "Your father," Stannis said, and his voice cut the words to pieces, "was Jaime Lannister." Men do not like to hear such things. Men who have made their whole life a mask do not like to have it ripped. The Great September is a place for piety and for ceremonies that slow men's blood. It is not a place for brawls. But when truth like that is spoken under lamps that make saints' faces glow, something must happen. Renly moved first with a hiss of breath. Cersei pulled Joffrey back. Boros stepped forward. Meryn stepped forward. Barristan's hand went to his sword with a slowness that said, he did not want to draw it, but he would, and he would not be the first. Gold cloaks at the doors shifted like wheat before wind. Littlefinger watched with bright interest, as a man watches a race to see where he will place his last coin. "This is not decided in a rush," Ned said, his voice rising. "We will not stain Baelor's stones with blood. The lords will judge. The realm will judge," Stannis said. "In the meantime, the boy is contained." "Contained," Cersei said. "He is to be your king." Stannis did not bother looking at her. He looked at Janos Slynt. "Commander," he said, "the Protector commands that you keep order. Keep order now. Do not let the boy flee, and do not let men touch him. Do not let the queen leave the Sept without leaving her boy behind." Janos Slynt gaped. He had been told by Cersei to keep a boy safe by making him a king. He had been told by Ned to keep a boy safe by making him wait. He was now told by a man no one had yet seen in the city that the boy would be kept but not crowned, and that the queen would be made to give him up. There are moments when a man can feel the path he takes turning him into a kind of man he had not been. Janos Slynt was not a brave man, but he knew a tide when it broke against his ankles. "Keep order," he said hoarsely to the men at the doors. To his captains, quieter, "Keep order." To himself, under his breath, "Keep my head." The gold cloaks moved. They did not drag Joffrey. They made a space around him with their bodies. The hound's hand went to his hilt. "Touch him and I'll." "You will kill men in a Sept," Barristan said without drawing steel. "And then you will kill more and make a river where there is stone. You are not so great a fool." The hound's mouth shaped something that might have been a laugh and then was not. He did not draw. Neither did anyone else. Sometimes a sword remains in its scabbard and the day still changes. Cersei stared at her son as if she could make him king by looking hard enough. Then she stared at Ned. She hated him. He saw it in her eyes like a light. He envied her for how simple that must make things seem. "You will lose," she said. Ned's mouth was dry. He thought of Winterfell, of snow and quiet, of a heart tree's face watching. He said, "Perhaps, but not today." The city writhed. Rumor runs quicker than a man, quicker than a horse. By evening, men in Flea Bottom were telling each other that the tall Northman had stolen the boy's crown and the old king's brother had come with ships, and you could see the salt on his face, and the queen had scratched his eyes out and he had laughed. In the Street of Sisters, a woman with a bruise on her wrist told her neighbor the protector had promised bread. In the Street of Steel, men sharpened blades slower than before they knew where those blades might be pointed. In the Red Keep, a boy stood at a window and stared out at the great September with a face that had suddenly learned how to tremble. He was not Joffrey. He was younger. He wanted his cat back, and his sister singing, and his mother to be someone other than the woman the city was looking at. Tommen had been told to be brave. He had thought that meant not to cry. He had not known it meant to stand while the world shouted. Myrcella sat with a doll in her lap and a lady in waiting at her shoulder, who told her a story from Dorne about a lizard lion, and then realized that this was not the story to tell. She told a different one. The girl listened and her eyes went huge, and when she smiled, it was the sort of smile that lets light out. She had not yet learned to hide it in a box. Robb Stark stood beneath the weirwood in Winterfell and read his father's raven's words and tightened his hand upon the paper until it crumpled and smoothed it with his other palm because it was still his father's words even if it had his creases now. The Riverlands had already smoldered. Gregor Clegane had ridden. The Tully banners had been called. Robb had put his hand upon Grey Wind's rough head and said, "We go!" And men had cheered because they wished to move when their blood was hot. Now he saw a different path open like a thin cleft in ice. "Protector," he murmured, and the word made him stand a little straighter. Catelyn read with him, her mouth tight, her eyes moving like a woman's who had been told a good thing and a bad thing together and must decide which to hold in her palm and which to throw away. "He is alive," she said. "He is alive and the law holds him." She closed her eyes briefly. If the Lannisters strike while the city stands for him, they will be shown for what they are. If they do not strike, perhaps we will see men wearing different faces. "Robb must still go," the great Jon said, while gnawing on a bone of beef as if it were a theory. "The Riverlands need the North. What is the use of a protector if he is trussed up like a deer and no one hounds the men who put the noose on him?" "We will go," Robb said, voice newly firm. "But we will go knowing we ride to aid a city standing for my father, not to avenge him. That makes men hold their saddles differently." Catelyn touched his cheek. "And perhaps," she said softly so that only he and the gods would heard, "it will make you hold your sword differently when the time comes." The time came quickly and slowly both, as times do when cities hold their breath. The next morning, Ned stood beneath Baelor's statue and announced in a voice that did not tremble that the markets were to be kept open, that bread was to be given at midday at Cobbler's Square and at dusk before the Mother's house in the Street of Silk, that there would be men who would keep streets clear so people might eat in order instead of in riot. Littlefinger made a little moo with his mouth and then made the coin find its way to the places it must go to make that happen. Janos Slynt made his men stand in lines and hated how orderly the lines against riot were when they were made by the man he had been paid not to obey. Cersei sent Lannister men to Rosby and Duskendale to keep the roads near and hoped to draw the noose tight. Stannis sent ravens to Storm's End and to lords in the Crownlands who still listened to old laws. Renly slipped from the city at dawn with 50 men wearing cloaks that made them look like smoke. Ser Loras laughed like a boy and then set his jaw like a man. On the 4th day after Robert's death, Stannis stood in the Great September and spoke words as if he were a maester and not a lord. "The precedent is clear," he said. "The father's sin makes a child something else than what he thinks he is. The realm must be protected from the contagion of a lie." Men glared at him because he made ugly things sound like facts dressed in gray cloaks. Ned did not glare. He studied him as one studies a wall. One does not expect a wall to be witty. "We will not seize the boy in the night," Ned said. "We will not hang the queen. We will call a council of lords. We will swear men to peace and we will keep peace. And then we will declare what is true and men will be ashamed to argue." "They will not be ashamed," Stannis said flatly. "They will change the subject. They will talk about grain and galleys and banners. Then they will bring swords to the council. Then they will ask why the word protector means coward. Ned's mouth tightened slightly. If you have a better path, name it. Stannis did not. He had a path, but it was not better. It had more blood upon it. He could see the great September full of men wearing iron. The red keep with its gates thrown open under a hammer stroke. The boy dragged and the queen screaming and the realm's stomach turning. He could see it. He had imagined it on the ship when he stood with his hands to the rail and let the wind slap sense into him. He had told himself that he would not do it if there were another way. He had told Davos that men must be made to swallow truths with bread, not with iron. Davos had looked at him in that way he had and said nothing. He had left Stannis to argue with himself. A messenger came that afternoon with a banner in his hand and dust in his hair. "Lord Tywin," he said when his breath had come back to him. "He has crossed the Golden Tooth. He is in the Riverlands. He burns where he walks." Men look up when they hear a distant thunder and think it is the sky telling them a story about a storm. This thunder was the ground telling them a story about hooves. Ned closed his eyes for a moment and saw Catelyn's mouth as it had been when she came to him with the knife and the cat's paw story. Then he opened them and looked at Littlefinger. "You will not keep the tolls for your own toys today," he said. "You will open whatever chests you keep beneath your bed, and you will find the dragons inside, and you will feed them to the men in the streets as bread. The Riverlands burn. We must hold the city." Littlefinger touched his heart with 3 fingers as if swearing a comically pious oath. "For love of you," he said, "or bread. I get them confused." He went and he opened the chests because men love bread and he loved being the one who kept them from killing to get it. Stannis set men on the walls and borrowed men from the gold cloaks and did not ask them whether their purses jingled with Lannister gold because he did not care. He put Davos in charge of making sure the river stayed watched and set a plan for a chain in his head without knowing where he could find the iron, and told himself he would not need it if men behaved. Cersei smiled and let the butchers' purses jingle louder. She shut the gates of the Red Keep and made it a place where men shouted orders and women wept and servants carried trays of silver and jellied meats as if there were no siege in the city and no hunger in the alleys. She wrote to her father. She wrote to Jaime. She wrote to the Tyrells. For all that Renly had flown to them like a green bird. She emboldened men like a fever emboldens the rash. She went again to the great September because she would not let the wolves have it. She stood beneath the lamps with Joffrey at her side and she said, "I will not let my son be made a hostage to a book." And some men murmured assent and some women spat on the floor and the High Septon winced and prayed silently for good sense to find the city like rain finds a field. On the 7th day, Ned stood in the nave when a voice rose behind him that he had known since boyhood and had not heard in years. It had an edge in it now that had not been there then. "Stark," it said. Ned turned. Jaime Lannister stood 3 paces away, hair like the light, face like a blade. He wore no helm and no shame. His white cloak fell like a statement. His hand rested on the sword that had killed a king for less than this. He smiled as if a very clever joke had occurred to him and he was deciding whether to share it. "Lord Tyrion's misadventures have brought me back to my father," Jaime said lightly. "And my father's dispositions have brought me to my sister, and my sister's temper has brought me to you. You were not present when your king died," Ned said. He did not reach for a sword. He reached for the stillness he had learned under snow. Jaime's smile grew. "No. I was busy making certain you had cause to hate me. Do not thank me. It is easy work." His eyes flicked to Stannis, who stood with arms like 2 bars of iron crossed upon his chest. "You read books now, Stannis? It becomes you. I always thought you a man who counted planks and found nails wanting." "You killed a king," Stannis said simply, as one points to a stone and says stone. "And saved a city," Jaime said, equally simple. "You are about to save a book and lose a city." His hand did not move on his hilt. "Let the boy sit, Stark. Call him what you like, call yourself what you like. Call my sister whatever word your gods allow you for a woman who does what she must. Sit him and then argue. The order is the thing," Ned said. "Argue then sit, and men will have time to listen." "Men do not listen," Jaime said. They will look at a boy upon a throne and see a king. They will look at a man beneath a lamp and see a clerk. He shrugged. I prefer kings I can like. This one is not it. But I like city walls that do not bleed, too. If a man like Jaime Lannister tells you that a thing you are doing looks foolish, you do not stop doing it because Jaime told you. You examine it, for he is not a fool. Ned examined. He found that he could not set the boy upon the throne and live with his own ribs without splintering. He found that he could not tell a Septon to declare falsehood truth. He found that he could not put his daughters into Cersei's hands with a smile. He found that he could not let a lion's jaw close when he could set a wolf's foot down upon it. The boy will not sit, he said. Not yet. Jaime's mouth shaped an ah. He inclined his head. Then if you wish to keep order, you had better be a better commander than Janosslint. He looked at Barristan. And you had better be a better Kingsguard than the men who stood while Aerys burned the man who brought him his dinner. He turned and went, cloak whispering, boots sure. That night, the city almost discovered how much blood a Sept's floor can drink. Hunger and fear are two wolves that love to run together. There was a rumor in Flea Bottom that the bread the Protector had promised was being taken away to the Red Keep, and that the boys in gold were eating it while laughing. Men gathered. Some of the gold cloaks had purses that told them to break heads and not care. Some had heads that told them they did not want to be the ones to break a boy's face who had come for bread. There was a push, and the push became a surge. Ned heard the roar like a far storm and sent men. He sent Will and Harwin and men who had been boys when they had hunted rabbits in Winterfell snows and now stood in a hot city wishing for cold. He sent a message to Janosslint that was not a request. The men made a line with their bodies in the square, shields braced, staves crossed. The Septa from the mother's house came out and looked at them as if they were children who had to be told to share. She climbed upon the steps and held up a loaf of bread and broke it and began to hand out pieces with hands that had the strength of habit in them. The crowd roared again, but this time it sounded like waves coming to shore rather than a rockslide. Men moved. Men took bread. Men went away. Not all of them. Enough. When Ned slept that night for an hour, he dreamed of Winterfell because he had not dreamt of it the night Robert died. He dreamed of the crypt and of a woman's statue he could not look in the face. He woke with his heart heavy and his resolve hard. In the morning, he wrote again to Catelyn. He told her to tell Robb to come south as the Riverlands needed. He told her the city had not burned because of a loaf of bread. He told her that there were more loaves to bake. He told her Arya had kept her feet. He told her Sansa was safe. He did not tell her that safety is a thing that changes shape as soon as a man thinks he is holding it. On the 10th day the lords came. Not all of them. Enough. Rosby, Stokeworth, Hayford, Ricker, Celtigar from the Claw with crimson crabs on his sails and a nose that had grown red with the wind. Men whose houses were not great but had stood for centuries. Men who wanted to stand upon something. They came to the Great September because the Red Keep had made itself a box with a lid. The High Septon listened to them and prayed with them and told them to speak decently. Ned set parchment upon a table and had them sign that they would keep peace until the succession were determined by a council of lords sworn to the Seven. Stannis set his jaw and put his name on it. Renly was gone. Cersei sent a message that said, I have already signed with my blood. Jaime stood at a window in the Red Keep and watched the Sept's lamps as if they were a constellation he did not recognize. Cersei stood beside him. He will lose, she said low. They will starve. They will grow angry. They will remember that they love a boy's bright hair. Father will come. He will bring order, and then we will make songs about how the Northmen tried to play at laws with men who did not like laws. Perhaps, Jaime said, perhaps they will make different songs. Perhaps the Northmen will find that paper can be iron if enough men put their weight upon it. She looked at him sharply. You begin to sound like a priest. He smiled lazily. Who knows? Perhaps I will take the cloth. I would look well in white. Stay, she said suddenly. An unexpected word from a woman who did not like to say stay to anything that did not think it was her place. Stand with him. Then, when he falls, stand with me. I am a knight of the Kingsguard, he said mildly. I stand with whoever men call king, and right now they are looking at lamps rather than thrones." He stroked a finger down the ironwork of the window like a man soothing a horse. "When the time comes to draw, I will draw. Till then, I will watch. It is a curious play." In the Riverlands, Jaime would soon find less curious play. Tywin marched and men fled and burned and fought. Robb crossed the neck with a host whose banners looked like winter nights set aflame, and whose men had learned since boys how to be quiet on snow. Catelyn rode to Riverrun to a father whose hands had grown thin and eyes tired. At the twins, a crookback lord weighed courtesy, coin and pride, and set them upon a scale that had rusted long ago and now squealed when it moved. The city did not wait intently every hour now. One cannot hold one's breath forever. But it listened. It listened when the High Septon rang the bell at noon and Ned read out the names of the lords who had signed. It listened when Stannis enumerated the law. It listened when Littlefinger made jokes and Goldcloaks laughed and then looked at their boots to see if anyone saw. It listened when bread was handed. It listened when a man was punished for stealing by having his hand broken with a stone rather than cut off, Ned's order, because a man can still turn a millstone with a broken hand when it heals and cannot with a missing one. It was listening when, on the 13th day, a rider came up from the south gate with dust and blood and a banner that had been white once and was now a dirty gray. "Renly Baratheon," he cried, "has declared himself king at Highgarden. Mace Tyrell has set his banners with him. They send word that the city must open its gates to the rightful king." Men look at paper and at gold and make their sums. They look at banners and make prophecies. Ned looked at Stannis, and for the first time he saw a crack in the man that was not temper. It was something like sorrow, though Stannis would never say the word and would probably break a tooth trying. "So," Stannis said, as if the word were a sword he had to get out of his mouth before he choked on it. "The realm breaks itself to spite its nose." He lifted his chin. "Let him come. Men will look at two brothers and see which has a face like a coin and which has a face like a door. They will pick coin. Then we will show them the door." Ned said, "We will keep the city." "We will," Stannis said. "We will until your paper and my iron become one and we can hammer the rest of the realm to fit." He looked at Ned sidelong. "Your sons." "My sons," Ned said tightly, and thought of Robb riding and Bran sleeping, and Rickon solemnly trying to be a wolf and a boy at once. "Will thank you if you live," Stannis finished, and he looked away as if he were embarrassed to have said something like thanks. Renly did not come at once, but the news of him blew like pollen, making men sneeze and eyes water. The Tyrells sent carts of grain with their banners fluttering prettily, because they liked to be seen giving and did not mind being seen demanding in the same gesture. The carts turned at Duskendale and went back south when they saw Lannister men. Men call that prudence. Men call it other things, too. On the 15th day, bread ran low. Littlefinger shrugged with admirable charm and suggested cutting it thinner. Ned cut it thinner. Then he went to the Street of Silk and the Street of Flower and the Street of Sisters and spoke not as a lord, not even as hand, but as a man who had learned that a city is made up of thousands of houses and each house is made up of two hands and a mouth and a heart. He said, "Tomorrow the loaves will be smaller. The day after they may be smaller still. The day after that they may be larger. We are not running a feast. We are crossing a winter. The first wolf that eats too quickly starves in the last day. You know this." They did know it. The North knows it. The South knows it too, though it pretends not to. The small folk grumbled, but less than they would have if the order had come down like a curse. When Cersei sent a woman into the crowd to shout that the hand was starving their children to feed his wolf, the woman was told sharply to mind her own belly by a fishwife who had already cut her loaf in half and given the smaller to her son. Ned's men slept in shifts upon the great September's floor. Barristan slept sitting up in a chair like a man who had never learned how to be comfortable unless steel was beneath him. Stannis slept badly and woke angry, which was to say he woke himself. Varys did not sleep. Littlefinger slept well because his bed was soft and his conscience was made of down. Janos Slynt slept with his boots on. And then, like a stone thrown into a pond far off that sends a ripple to your ankles when you least expect it, news came that Robb Stark had crossed the Green Fork. News came that Jaime Lannister had been captured near the Whispering Wood, laughing when he fell because he could not help but laugh when fate decided to be clever. News came that Tywin had turned his host. News came like rain. In the Great September, Ned stood and did not let his knees give way. The man who brought the word held it as a thing that might break. "Lord Stark," he said, awe in his voice, because he had seen the boy with the wolf and now he saw the boy's father and he loved stories and this would make one. "Your son holds the Kingslayer." Ned shut his eyes for a heartbeat and opened them. He wanted to smile and he wanted to be sick. He did neither. "The Riverlands," he said. "Hold," the man said. "For now." The words had commas in them like breaths men must take between blows. Stannis did not smile. "If the West is turning home, the city will be more than a toy," he said. "The Lannister men at our gates will become hungry dogs. They will bite." "Let them try," Ned said. "They will break their teeth on stone and on bellies not as empty as theirs." Cersei sent for Ned that evening, not to the Red Keep, but to a small courtyard where lemon trees grew as if they had forgotten that they did not belong in this soil. The lemons were green. She touched one with her fingertip as if she could turn it yellow with her heat. "You are making a world," she said. "Do you think you can keep it?" "I am keeping a day," Ned said. "Worlds are for men who like to be gods." She laughed without mirth. "And you like to be priests. Tell me, priest, what will you do when my father comes? When Renly comes? When the Tyrells come with flowers that choke and fruit that rots the moment you bite?" "When men come," Ned said, "I will tell them the law and I will hand them bread. If they still wish to fight in a city where their names will be cursed for 100 years, then I will let them fight and make sure they do not burn it after." "You are boring," she said. "You are so very, very boring." "I have been called worse," he said. If it were a history written by a maester who liked clean endings, it would end with a sword. It is neither. It is a city that discovered paper can hold a gate if enough men put their shoulders to it, and that bread is a weapon when used to keep peace. It is a city that learned a word and used it more than it used another. Weeks turned to a new moon and then another. The Riverlands became less fire and more smoke. Robb fought and wrote and learned to sleep in armor. Jaime Lannister sat in a tent and made jokes and waited and thought, possibly for the first time in his life, without a sword in his hand. Catelyn moved like a woman who had once been a girl who had thought herself a lady and now knew she was something else entirely. Sansa learned to say little and listen much. Arya learned to move. Barristan watched. Stannis counted. Littlefinger smiled. Varys listened. On a morning that smelled of rain that would not come, the lords of the Crownlands and a number of others gathered in the Great September. They stood in a circle as if they were men at a pasture's edge watching two bulls sniff. Stannis read a declaration that would have been poetry if it had not been so fond of words like according. Renly's envoy read a declaration that was almost poetry. Cersei did not attend and sent a cupbearer whose hand shook and spilled wine upon the floor and was forgiven because the floor was stone. Ned spoke last because he had learned that sometimes men listen harder when they have had their fill of other voices. "The boy Joffrey will not sit the throne," he said. "He is not the king. The law is clear. The Lord's oaths are clear. Stannis Baratheon is the rightful heir." Renly's men murmured. Tyrells hissed behind their teeth. Some men who had been ready to clap for bread looked at each other as if wondering whether they were supposed to cheer for a door. Cersei's cupbearer looked as if he wished to crawl under his tray. Stannis did not smile. He did not know how when he was pleased. Davos's mouth curved without his permission. "The city will keep peace," Ned went on. "We will feed you. We will open the gates when we know they will not be used to trample us. If you wish to fight a war over a chair, you may do it elsewhere. The chair will be here when you have finished." A murmur, so strange in such a place that if a man shut his eyes he might have thought he was in a market. But there was something else in it, too. A note that had not been there before. It was the sound men make when they realize they have survived another day without drawing steel. It is not a cheer. It is a breath released. Cersei did not storm the September. She did not storm anything. She waited. She waited for father and brother and roses and storm to settle into something that looked like a pattern she could use. She did not find that pattern. She found instead a city that had learned to keep a promise to itself, and a man who had discovered that the law becomes a thing with arms and legs when 1,000 men decid to be its limbs. She found a boy who, in a year that ran both quicker and slower than any boy's year has a right to, learned that there were words he could not say and be obeyed. He did not become gentler. He became quieter. There is danger in that. It lives in dark places. It would flicker later, but for now it meant a city could breathe. Ned Stark did not become king. He did not want to be. He became something else for a time that was enough to change weeks into a story men would tell. He walked through streets where men said, "Protector," not as a sneer, and not as a song, but as if it were the name of a tool that had worked when their roof leaked. He walked through the great September and heard the lamps hum and thought of Winterfell often and wished for snow under his boots and not for spikes under his heart. When at last Stannis stood upon the steps with the High Septon's hand held awkwardly upon his head, because he did not enjoy being touched, and the oil ran and the word "king" was said without flinching, it was not an end. It was another door. The realm would still be a realm, with lords and lies and hungers and heroes and men who smiled with knives in their sleeves. There would be fights and there would be blood and there would be winters even in cities made of red stone, where summer seems eternal. There would be a woman in the west who watched a child grow with hatred in his bones like a frost that strikes late and kills seedlings. There would be a dragon across the sea learning the names of winds. There would be a boy in the north who learned the weight of a sword upon a shoulder and did not let it drive him into the earth. But for a time, for a summer's dying and autumn's first breath, the city that had known the taste of wildfire in rumor and iron in fact knew instead the taste of bread and the sound of bells. And a man who had come from snow and old stones lifted the weight given him by a dying king, and he did not break beneath it, because he did not carry it alone.